Macias, and I'm grateful to be here at the 3rd Annual International Blackfoot Research Conference. It's always been meaningful to visit. Although I'm not from here, my relatives are, and I have family with long histories here, and so it's always meaningful to be here at the community college and thinking about family connections, but also thinking about the significance of what the FCC is doing. So by bringing people together across the Confederacy, and so I'm honored to be here. I'll introduce myself and then talk a bit about the order for today, and then we will turn the time over to Larry Graham and Lee Macias, two society members that we are honored to have here in our presence today, who will also be opening for today. So a little bit about myself. I am a dance maker, recognizing dance making in diverse forms, whether that be set movement, choreography, dance, maybe improvised or in social settings. So I'm a dance maker and a dance scholar, and that means that I look at dance in the way that it reflects and enacts histories, political, economic, social, and theoretical realities and phenomena. And specifically, I am looking at dance as an act of resistance against settler colonialism. I currently reside in Massachusetts, where I hold a position as the Alan Berenson Postdoctoral Fellow through Brandeis University in Indigenous Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies. But I was brought up in Southern California with Amskapi Pikani relatives from Heartbutte and Browning, and Aani relatives from Fort Belknap. My immediate family also includes Black Afro relatives from the Nickerson family and Mexican relatives from the Lopez Hernandez family from regions of Sonora and Sinaloa. And I name them all. They are my immediate lineages. They inform who I am. But they also have their own histories in relation to dispossession within the United States. And when I say dispossession, I'm talking about the separation of bodies from land, of culture from people, of people from themselves. This background and naming the lineage shapes my approach to relation, to research, and to creation. And though I'm not fluent and I use and learn the language of my Niiksokowaiks ancestors as an important act of embodied remembrance, I also speak as a way to continue learning and to continue to put that breath into the world. I think my mother, Mandy Dawn Nickerson, who is joining me today and will also be part of the performance that I'll share. I also thank my uncle, Dr. Patrick Weaselhead, who was also part of the BFCC community here. I also thank loved ones, Patricia Deverell, Bootsy and family, Lee and Larry, the late Gail, Bearchild, and Kenny everybody talks about, and Chief Earl Oldperson, all who share and model language and knowledge for me. Special thanks to Blackfeet Community College and the Native American Research Centers for Health for putting together the conference and bringing people together. And so perhaps in a unique format today, I'll share, and this is reflective of the field of dance and dance studies. There are times where we dance our presentations. There are times where we share dance. There are times where we talk about our research and our studies. And so today I'll start by sharing a fuller length dance work, which is about 20 minutes, excerpts from a greater dance work that is about 35 minutes plus. And then I will move into a spoken paper presentation that will share a bit more about my own work and research, and then the process of developing this dance work. And I'll leave time for Q&A, which you're also welcome to take notes throughout. So if a thought comes to mind and you want to hold on to that and ask a question after, you're welcome to do so. And last, I just want to note that the dance and the paper presentation for today does touch on themes of trauma, grief, and Indian boarding school. And recognizing the sensitivity of these topics, I invite folks to take a moment if they need to step away at any time, even in the middle of the performance, you're welcome to do so. And then last, in terms of expectation, there will be parts, one point where I will be showing my shoulders, and so I also want to just share what parts of those dance you might see. So I will turn the time over before getting into the performance to Larry and Lee, our society members who are honored to have here with us today, who will start with a prayer for opening.
Okay, Niiksokowaiks. Anakot makuiskopstarks. Garupitama garupiyas pita. Come on in. You guys can you can film. Okay, because what we're doing is important. If she has it in the future. It's important for her to, especially for the language purpose, eh? Okay, and there's a couple things that we're going to do. One is that this young lady, hey, come here. Before we start this prayer, we are going to give her a name. One of the reasons why, when you're moving like in the spirit world of beginning, what is it to be? There's Blackfoot, because that way, then you can kind of raise up a lot more when you do have such a thing happen for you. And so, with that, I'm going to tell you right now that today, the English name that you're going to take and know her as from this day forward, you will know her as Miracle Dance Woman. This is going to be her name. And so this is the way we're going to do. We're going to take and pray. And then we're going to push her into life, into new life. When we push you into new life, look at me. When we push you into new life, then you can just kind of come stand by us. And then we're going to really pray. Really, really pray. Okay? Okay, nila tuit pina kusis tapai tuit pakis pommokinga. Ayo kipadaki sikaki kuyaki manakapi pai pommokinga. Joken kakin is pommokinga gistakim pommosa. Joken kakin is pommokinga kasamoika. Ayo kipadaki is pommokinga gisaki alon is pommokinga joken napina kus. Ayo kipadaki is pommosa. Paksi pisotis is pommosa kanaksimita mopastanan is pommokinga. Misa mapadre pakis pommokinga natus. Ayo kipadaki siksakaki. Saktuya kinik pommokinga sapan stan ampaskanaki. Evstakio man nepatakios. So today you will know her by Miracle Dancing Woman. This is her name. And you can even say magical, huh? And the reason why we named her this, we seen her dance and we seen her presentation last year, and it touched people. And the presentation that she did awakened people's life. It awakened them, awakened their spirit. And that's what she's doing. Not sometimes. She's doing this all the time. And it's not just for herself, but she's doing it for many people, huh? To help awaken their spirit, huh? And so now we're going to pray. Ayo istabakipio. Ayo apistatuki nake tsisisimo. Nake kimotsisana. Nake kakimasana. Nake toitaksana. Otukina napistatuki. Kemes kokusik, execumadapsia, na kokit, tani, estawatsamani, na kokit, sixagato pinan, kopdoi de tutsi, ni samapaitritsin, ael napinatus, istapatrio, espumokit, noktokit, asamoika, na kokit, sixagato pinan, ipusamas, sepamapi, nexpumokina, na biosin, esistovatsaman, mi samapaitritsin, ayakipataki, na binatus, kitsi siksi matsamopinan, kimatukinan nestono upukasan, espomokinan, kiasamatsokinan, suksipatsin, kokinan, mi samapaitritsin, ki kamatani, Amen. Enjoy your presentation. Your husband. Go.
I'm going to invite everyone to lower their gaze or close their eyes, and we're just going to find a moment of presence. Close our eyes and notice your relationship to breath. Taking deep breaths. Noticing the rise and the fall of the chest on that out breath. Noticing your relationship to this space, to weightedness, to stability. Your relationship to those around you in this space. Maybe some of you know each other, maybe you don't. We're all sharing space and breath in this moment. Taking a few more breaths. Maybe noticing where you feel tension or uncertainty or heaviness. Can you send breath there? Remembering that breath, every breath is an act of reciprocity. We take in from the world around us, from the trees, from the plant life, and we give back to the life around us. In these last couple of breaths, I invite you to find a sense of presence. And when you're ready, you can go ahead and open your eyes, and we'll go ahead and get started. think about, and if you would like to share, you're welcome to, but to think about what it is that you saw, that stood out to you. What did you feel? What do you have questions about? Take a couple of minutes, and I'll leave it open for those who would like to share before I move into the paper presentation. We'll share more about the depth process. Then we're thinking about what it is that you saw. What stood out to you? What do you feel? When did you feel it? What questions do you have? And
yes,
from the moment that you start putting the dirt on the floor, I realized how sacred and how full of life is the earth. That everything comes from the earth. It's full of spirit and life. And then when you regress back in onto the high chair, I don't know why, but I see our people pulled away from all that they knew and backed up into a space, and that their spirit kept shrinking the more that they took away who we were and what we're about. And then you started to lift up, but you were lifting up, but you wasn't like really connecting to what was around you. And it was kind of like a whirlwind, maybe like a chaos or just not understanding. And then as you move toward the water is life, but the water like cleansed you from all that you had gone through as being an Indigenous person, a Hispanic person, a lady of color, and you went to the water, and the water cleansed you of the pain and the hurt and everything that you had experienced. And then you brought that together again with what you knew that is sacred and that is of you back to the earth. And then you danced away from it, and then you recovered in your sacred cloak. And then you transformed and came back alive and was able to dance and to share your sacredness through everything that you knew and that you know of the past, the present, and the future that you want and that you aspire. I don't know, it was really touching. It made my spirit quake. I was like panting at times, and it was just very, very touching. I don't even know how I come up with that. But that's what I felt. I felt the spirit moving. And that was what was so beautiful, but it helped me to reconnect to what is real and what is true and what we go through or that what people have been through. And even though I wasn't there at those times in this life, I still carry that memory. Like Trudeau says, that genetic memory. I don't know how that is, but it is. And it was very healing for me. And I thank you, Eva. And thank you.
Anybody else like to share? Do they have any? Yes.
I saw the sacred expression of your connection to the earth. Earth energy is like the beginning of all of life. And just the connection and your balance. And your connection was slow, it wasn't fast. And you took time to reconnect with what we've always been. And then you moved from there into a power struggle. And the power struggle from the innocence and that power struggle and that constant rocking and pulling and the destruction of an outside energy beyond your control. And then a recontrol and you pulling away and you were re-emerging to the essence and the other element of water, and water is a healing. And then the reconnection to earth, like a journey on its own, and the connection with water and earth, healing into your own essence of freedom. From the movement of the water to the dance, and to a re-emerging, and then to the removing of old things, old ways, to a freedom of your life and the expression of your beauty, and to your own power and the empowerment of your own destiny, to becoming your own vision. I acknowledge that I'm a sun dancer, and that journey is somewhere you can't go on alone. It's a journey through the elements, through time, through distance. It is a powerful journey, it is an awakening, and I can relate to that. Air, earth, water, and fire. And I saw the expression of the elements, and I give thanks. Such is my gratitude.
Thank you. Are there any questions that came up for people? Whether about the movement, the outfitting. Oh, yes.
I was just wondering, do you plan out your dances, or do you just feel the energy and like your emotions? Because I know some people like to, and then some people say that it's more spiritual to just dance and, tell the story as it is. I was just wondering which one you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for asking. And I think this is an important part of recognizing the diversity of what dance making could mean, right? Because there's sometimes where dance is in a social setting, maybe in a powwow, right? And we freestyle, or we respond to the moment, or we're chatting with someone next to us, and we're all still dancing, right? So there's this bit of freestyle, or maybe improvised, if we were to use dance vocabulary in the field, improvised element, right? But then there's also maybe this idea of choreography, particular placement of movement in space and time, or maybe set movement if we aren't using the term choreography. And there's more to be said about that in terms of what choreography means and the history of that word and its connection. But this is all to say that some of the elements in the dance are both set. There's a particular place and meaning for each movement or an intention, but then some of it is more freestyle or responsive. So what's more set is how we look at the space with the stool, the placement of particular parts of this piece, and how I get there, the levels that I change. I anticipate that. How I engage with the different aspects of the dance. But also responsive, that maybe the distance is different here than it is when I've shared it in Lenapehoking in Brooklyn, than it is when I share it in Massachusetts territory, than it is when I share it outside. Right? So being prepared to respond to the space and the place is also, I would say that's more improvised. And so sometimes the movement looks a little bit different. And sometimes, and because a lot of this dance is also based on, for myself, being very present in the performance, it will feel different every time, because I feel different when I'm present here than when I'm present in a different place, than when I'm present at home. So I don't know if that quite answers the question. Okay, great. Yeah.
I seem like a time movement in a sense. Okay, like from the human part, eh? Like when your mom was taking care of you. It was like it was like, okay, here I am, a female, and here's my mother taking care of me, and it was so just really like spot on, like getting you ready to move you into the world, right? And then you went into the world in the dirt, in the dirt, and when you start feeling it, there's like a transformation of your spirit that became not so more humanistic, but in a sense of like animal sense. That's what I got from that. Because when you were feeling, and you were moving, and you could touch, and you could feel, then all of a sudden you became earthly. And you moved in that direction. When you moved in that direction like that, then all of a sudden you transformed into like a little child, like a little child that was like Pat said, stuck in a boarding school, stuck in a place where it wasn't good, eh? And when you were moving in there, and then it was almost like you was being beat down, and no, you can't do that. No, this is how you have to be. No, and you just kind of curled up into a ball. When you curled up into a ball, and then you start evolving as a little child. Then you start evolving as something else. When you start evolving as something else, then you became more, how would you say, powerful. And you were able to take in, like wash it off. Come to that part. And when you were able to cleanse, basically, and you was like getting back to your roots of who you are, and then all of a sudden you start transforming, and you just kind of like rolled up like a caterpillar, and you transformed into a butterfly. That's what I see. When you come out and you start dancing, that's what I see. It's that butterfly. New life, right?
Mm.
That's what I see. New life, being able to take and go and move all over. So that's what I saw. And moving in time from like who you are to what was, could have been way back to moving into the future. Huh? That's what I feel.
So I will thank you. I thank you everyone who shared. I'm going to take the next time to present a little bit more about dance work, what I understand Indigenous dance in its many forms to mean and to do, and to take this through the process of creative work. If you do have any more questions or comments, I'll also leave time open for that as well. But I think a lot of what everyone has shared so far in terms of what the potential and possibility and the very importance of dance is, Indigenous dance or Native dances in its many forms, from powwow to ceremony to community to that round dance to stage dance, there is power and meaning and significance, even if it looks a different way. So I'll present a little bit more about that to give you a frame, and in more of a fashion reflective of some of the research that I do in dance studies. So I will share presentation and share paper. And I also want to thank my mom and also acknowledge her for being here and for also bringing me into the world, for all that she's done to share knowledge and to instill a sense of identity, a sense of connection, despite, and also in love. So I just want to recognize her. So we'll move into the presentation, and just to start, you'll notice that there are blank slides in this presentation to direct attention to listening for some parts. And there will also be some images that I might talk about, but if you have questions that come up from the images presented, please feel free to share that at the end of the presentation. So my research is framed by my experience with urban Native communities in Southern California, to connections with the Blackfoot Nation through relatives, through experiences, family stories, and academic influences like Betty Bastien's Blackfoot Ways of Knowing, Linda Tuhiwai-Smith's Decolonizing Methodologies, and works of Yakama scholar Michelle Jacob and Hupa feminist scholar Kutcha Rislingbaldi, who outline dance and ceremony as a decolonial praxis. So decolonial praxis meaning the possibility to decolonize or some movement towards decolonization through dance. And that's in short form, that is not definitive. We could talk about that even more. But as a dance maker and scholar, I explore how dance enacts Indigenous worldviews, makes interventions with the mind-body split, because our mind, body, spirit, and being are connected. The ways that Indigenous dance embodies knowledge, ethics, and protocols. Dance can repatriate Indigenous life, can connect and reconnect us to land, and lead to reparative work for humanity and all of life. Now, in my book project, which is a different, in some way related project, but this is what I'm working on in my current position, I look at fancy shawl dance as a site of defiance and gender expansive being for women, two-spirit, and gender diverse people. In dance making, I engage with story, embodied history, epistemology as a foundation to engage with human and more than human relationships. I also follow the thought of Anishinaabe scholar Liambira Samotsat Simpson in envisioning and actioning futures led by Indigenous worldviews that refuse the devaluation of life, especially for our most vulnerable, like our children, women, particularly Indigenous women and Black women, as well as the undocumented and migrant peoples, our two-spirit, queer, and trans peoples, those disabled, and especially those vulnerable to violence in many other ways. My work spans across teaching, practice, creative work, and scholarship, which works to center Siksikaitsidaapi perspective. And I will say that I do use bits of language, as I mentioned earlier, but if there are elders here or those who are fluent language speakers, you're also, please do correct me. I am still in the process of learning. You're welcome to correct me. But I draw on teachings from relatives, communities, and what Bastine cites from Blackfeet worldviews as Gakioksen, or coming to know. Bastine emphasizes learning the Blackfoot way through elders and ceremonies, a framework that I value even with geographic limitations, being an Amskapi Pikani person who is living in Massachusetts right now. From Bastine's work and Siksikaitsidaapi worldviews, knowledge is seen as living and experiential, is rooted in tribal practices and relationships with both the human and the more than human entities, which include the above people, the underwater people, and the underground people. Today's talk will focus on one aspect of my research through dance making, which looks at how dance engages embodied histories and stories, and enacts cross-temporal relationships, so relationships across time, connections to land and indigenous worldviews. To illustrate the importance of coming to know or Gakiosin in my research, I want to begin sharing a pivotal moment during my work with the Return Dance Project in Utah in 2020. This project coincided with the completion of my dissertation, in which I engaged with autoethnographic, ethnographic, and historical approaches to research, supported by theory and anchored in Blackfoot ways of knowing from Bastine's work. On a hot June day, a group of us gathered at the river in Hughes Canyon in Utah to improvise and to be filmed dancing in water. To make it through this project, I would have to confront the unanticipated flight reaction that my body was feeling, which was based on a lifelong fear of natural bodies of water. As I stepped into the cold, rushing water, memories of personal and ancestral traumas connected to water threatened to drown me. I thought about my parents, both Navy veterans who served over waters. I thought about the Black matriarchs who raised me, who carried stories of relationships to water as that of violence inflicted on their bodies during the segregation era in the United States. I felt the burn of fear, thinking about toxic waters on reservations that had ravaged my relatives' bodies with devastating illnesses. And when I say my relatives, I use this in connection to immediate lineage, but also recognizing kinship and adoption and connections beyond immediate lineage. The shock of contact with the cold water evoked the experiences of the racialized communities with whom I am in relation, from water crossings impeded by artificial boundaries to dispossession, the separation of bodies from land, and the violence in that process. In this moment of panic, I had to focus on my life breath and to center the sensations of that moment, what some might consider maybe in more Western understandings or practices and vocabularies as somatic, which is what our people have always known is connecting the body, the mind, and the spirit. I had to engage with internal perceptions of body awareness. I became conscious of the cold water and its healing presence, the gift of its healing presence and protection from the scorching summer heat. I felt the support of the rocks beneath me, offering a place to land. I breathed deeply to calm my heart and observe the natural surroundings, the trees, the sun, and the water itself. Speaking the Blackfoot word for water, auki, I reminded myself of water as a powerful yet nonviolent relative. This experience gave way to a deeper realization of how Blackfoot worldviews and embodiment through dance can make interventions with trauma, offer space for healing. This memory highlighted the role of dance as a way of noticing, as being present, as healing and reestablishing connections, reinforcing that knowledge is living and relational. My work more broadly recognizes Indigenous dance in its many forms as a powerful tool for addressing trauma, violence, and pain, while centering our stories, desires, and generativity rather than damage. And although there is damage as part of that, how do we move away and how do we find expansive ways of being? Dance rooted in Indigenous knowledge is a process of coming to know, is a form of defiance and a means of repatriating life. And through dance, I work with stories as sources of knowledge and as a way to honor relatives and their connections to the world. I explore dance, and please correct me, I'm understanding the word for dance as apashkan, but maybe I'm mispronouncing. I explore dance as apashkan, drawing from the articulation of this concept by Blackfoot elder Reg Crowshoe, who describes dance from its understanding as making that motion, that action, because you want to dance away illnesses, bad luck, all the problems, hurts, injuries, or emotional scars that were put on you. So using dance as a way of healing, as a way of connecting, as giving strength and a sense of identity. As Crowshoe concludes in this excerpt here, dance, it gives you strength, a sense of identity and purpose, a greater understanding of what you're doing. So in this way, dance as grounded in Indigenous epistemology, so worldviews are truths. It transcends more than aesthetics, than just what it looks like, perhaps, or concerned with the looks or the beauty of it. It transcends entertainment and expression. Dance, Indigenous dance, it embodies what we have always known, which includes our ways of knowing, our responsibilities, and it provides physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual healing, a holistic healing. With Apashkan at the center of understanding dance, I turn toward my solo dance work, that some of the excerpts of which I shared today, and the event that I hosted in Massachusetts most recently, to talk about embodied research that centers Blackfoot ways of knowing and how that came to be. The dance work some might refer to as in the realm of Indigenous contemporary dance, perhaps different from what some might know as traditional dance forms. But the event itself that I also hosted, also titled Niiksokowaiks My Relatives, aimed to break away from Western notions of space, time, and relationships. And Western notions meaning what seeks to define us, what seeks to compartmentalize us, to put us into different ways of being, assimilate us. The dance as a culmination of embodied research redefines a traditional audience-performer dynamic and instead invites guests to participate in the experience, to be present, reflecting Indigenous Blackfeet and Blackfoot communal approaches to dance, or at least that is the intent. Through this dance project, I explore themes of dispossession, embodied histories, not only my own, but the histories of my relatives, and relationships to human and more than human entities, using dance to make interventions with colonial violence and engage Indigenous world views to build new worlds from our ways of relation and space holding. So conceptualizing the dance and events, drawing on the concept of kakioksin, or coming to know. The image here shows the tree space that inspired this dance, so the full-length work of 35 minutes. This tree space is based in Massachusetts on campus at Brandeis University, which is situated in Nipmuc, Pawtucket, Massachusetts territories. These are the tops of the trees, of 6 trees that are in a circular formation and a central part of campus, which became a significant stimulus for my work, emerging in relation to years of internal reflection and dialogue. At the time that I found this space, or that this space found me, My family and I had recently moved across the country during the pandemic. We were distant from loved ones and familiar places. I was grappling with my mixed heritage identity and adjusting to a new academic position in an institution that lacks support for Indigenous faculty. I was the first and the only member in my department, a Native scholar, and I was one of a few Natives on campus. Additionally, I found myself advocating for everyone to recognize dance and Native Indigenous studies in various spaces, but also at an institution with no dance department or with limited course offerings. And now I say that recognizing the many opportunities that they have also afforded. But this work was not without that advocacy and without that challenge. Carrying this weight, I was pulled to remember my body and envision a dance tethered to the trees. So these trees also, I envisioned before I found this tree space. It actually came to me in a dream. I pictured myself dancing connected to the trees, representing the lineages, the direct lineages of family that I come from. I reflected on my mental and physical state, my family lineage, our relationships, our histories. And one day, I noticed the trees directly across from my office, which inspired me to bring this vision to life. The experience catalyzed the creation of Niiksokowaiks My Relatives as both an evening-length dance, but I also used that to refer to the event that I hosted last month. The solo dance work itself is a set and semi-structured work, including improvised dance that responds to where it is shared. So today it's here in this place, a place of Blackfeet and Blackfoot peoples, but was also shared in Massachusetts and Pawtucket territories, in Lenape-Hoking, and most recently in Blackfoot, Métis, and Nakota territories in Calgary, Alberta. Movement vocabularies and approaches to making this dance were derived from my experiences in participating in gatherings and powwows, from knowledge gained and learned from relatives, knowledge gained as an undergraduate and graduate student, and as a professional dancer. This work engages with familial and genealogical research, oral histories, embodied research that involves exploratory movement investigations from specific prompting to observation of archival documents, response to particular research material and texts, and noticing my own feelings, making inquiry into my own feelings through the process of movement creation to investigate what it means to move with histories, embodied histories, and the histories of my relatives based on their stories and mine. I situated my own embodied histories and experiences within this investigation. And throughout the process, I asked and continue to ask, what connections, disconnections, tensions, and relationships to land do our bodies, lineages, and stories hold? And I would invite you to also think about these questions. What does my own body hold, if that feels accessible to you? But to also think about the ways that beyond dance, maybe just everyday acts, how you might find presence or a sense of connection to self in your own body. So here we have some of the archival photos that I did work with and some photos of relatives. Above images here are my grandma Dora Brown, who's Aani, who's from Browning, who attended Chemawa boarding school in Salem, Oregon, with my grandfather George Weaselhead. And it's worth noting that Chemawa was one of the nation's oldest federal boarding schools and is still the longest and continuous operation, so it's in operation today. There's the image of my great auntie, Mary Redhead, or some would say Grandma Mary Redhead, from Browning, who attended Cut Bank boarding school here, and the Chemawa boarding school where she graduated. In school, she labored by washing sheets and consequently lost her arm. She still pursued hobbies of sewing and served on the Heartbeat Indian Days Committee and helped to introduce Fancy Shawl to the Blackfeet people. But I share this story to think about the ways that specific structures bear onto bodies, which was also part of the dance, sections of this dance in particular. And my grandma, my mother's mom, Arlene Weaselhead, who is also from here, who attended Cut Bank Day School, who was a beater and a member of communities. And on the right, we have here an archival image example from the sewing department of Cut Bank Boarding School in Montana. And in the back, you'll also see some archival photos in the left frame of images of students from Chemawa Boarding School, who this is part of a greater project through WSU, where they shared and circulated these images online, asking people if you can identify these children. Their records were lost, so they are still working to identify these children. And this was also part of what I've shared in the different iterations and presentations of this dance. In creative research and process, I drew from archival sources, such as these photos, as well as documented stories to investigate family relationships to land, to each other, multi-layered dispossession, and embodied histories, and understand or make sense of lived experiences. Descending from relatives who were forced into racially distinct yet overlapping systems of containment, assimilation, and violence. I think about dance making in relation to relatives and ancestors because I see my existence as inseparable from theirs. My existence is because of the ways that Niiksokowaiks My Relatives and my family, my lineage, the way that my ancestors moved about and survived in the world, who brought me into being. The evening length work was broken into 6 sections. I won't get into all of them for the sake of time. I shared 3 of the sections today. 4 of the sections. The first one, She is Braiding, She is Binding, where my mother, as a collaborative performer, braids my hair. The second section, which I did not share today, was Breath Offering, where I sing a woman's song leading into the dance sections. The third section, which you saw today with the water, is called Water Offering, which focused on themes of personal embodied traumas and cross-temporal connections to relatives and their own experiences, and particularly in relation to boarding school. I'll also share just a brief story here, connecting to another Blackfoot person in my youth. We had a brief conversation about how both of our birthdays landed in January, and we kind of talked about the connections of what it meant to be born in that time of year. And they had reflected, I cry so much around my birthday, I cry so much. I said, I feel that way too, and especially in the winter time. And they reminded me and they said, but these tears, we could think about our tears as water offerings. And so that was another story or a way that I thought about the water that our bodies hold. How do we think about ourselves in connection to water? The water that maybe a mother's body holds, or the water that we hold in, maybe we don't release or do release. And also thinking about our makeup as mostly water, and what does that mean to be connected or disconnected to water as one of the primary elements. The fourth section was Earth, which we saw, which was focused on relation and connections to the more than human. And these are all very brief, summarized. I could talk about each section in more depth, but the fifth section, Changing States, which was with a blanket focused on transformation and transcendence. And then the last section, to be related. In later iterations, and I was considering bringing this element, but due to the sake of time and planning, it was not something, unfortunately, that I could add. But I would bring you all as guests with me outside to an outside space where I would engage with ropes that were connected to trees. And that would also, in some ways, echo what took place as in the event on campus that I hosted and danced with the trees. And at the end of that dance sharing, not only does this invite guests to come out, does this invite you to come out and be outside in that space. but it also invites you to be present in the elements. So when this was performed in Massachusetts, it was actually raining. The days leading up to it, there was no rain, but I knew that that was part of the forecast, and I thought about the ways that our people endured through different dance forms. And so that was one aspect, was bringing guests out with me to be part of and be in connection to the space. So this dance is intended to be an enactment of a Pashkan, and it responded to specific contexts in which I performed it, so the different places. Elements of a Pashkan are referenced in the title Niiksokowaiks My Relatives, which reclaims Blackfoot language that was forbidden to be used in boarding schools in the assimilation era, and asserts language, speaking in the breath of the ancestors, as an act of sovereignty. In reference to hair cutting, my mother braids my hair as an act of intergenerational kinship and connection. The symbolism and engagement with water and earth is a reconnection to land that had been interrupted by settler colonialism's violent dispossession and tearing away children and people from their homes and their families. The water, which is also multi-meaning, is a specific intervention to the introduction or the violent introduction to Western hygiene, which sought to, quote, transform Native American children from savages to civilized citizens, end quote. This dance breaks free from the norms imposed by the boarding schools that emphasized home education and vocational training in nursing, domestic service and teaching, that taught girls to be submissive to authority and to be good wives, and where boys learned vocational skills in craftsmanship and farming, which educators believed would lead them and teach them the hardworking Protestant life and work ethic. Residential schools imposed heteropatriarchy on Native students and people, in which heterosexuality and patriarchy are perceived as normal and natural, and the ways of being were perceived as, and our ways of being, and diverse ways of being perceived as abnormal, aberrant, and abhorrent. In my dance, soil and water do not represent, as in a Western worldview, property, patriarchy, and discipline, but rather relationships between body, spirit, land, and water. Fancy shawl movement vocabularies employed drew from my lifelong experience as a fancy shawl dancer who's danced in social settings. A dance that I know is about transformation and to me represents shedding patriarchy and discipline and asserting Indigenous women's identity and recognizes gender diversity. Going from indoor to outdoor space invited those in attendance to be participants in collective movement. And here, this is an image from Lenape-Hoking, where I shared this work and gathered soil from that territory, brought it in, and invited people to get their hands in soil and to help me gather it back up so I could return it to where I gathered. Responding to trauma in Niiksokowaiks My Relatives emerged from family stories and archival sources from the institutions that my relatives attended. Different iterations of the dance work presented included a display of images of relatives, such as what you would see here. And due to the nature of the work, also provided informational and trauma resources from the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition, which you can find literature on the table there. I also included printed photos from the Washington State University Plateau Peoples Project to support families' efforts to identify children who attended Chemawa, children whose records were lost in the 20th century. The dance and event in Massachusetts included presencing Nipmuc people. So when I hosted this in Massachusetts, I sought to invite and include and center Nipmuc people in their traditional territories where Brandeis University resides. Tensions between the tribes and institutions in this area, and they will tell you outright that they were sure they would never step foot on these campuses because of fraught histories. Perhaps considered decolonizing through dance, or perhaps not considered decolonizing through dance, because decolonization is a process that must include the material repatriation of land and life. And institutions, outside institutions, continue to operate on Indigenous territories. Instead, I present this dance as rooted in a decolonial praxis. The dance work and event was rooted in ways of knowing and sought to activate people, to encourage them to think beyond the dance. And I hope that, and I invite you to continue to carry your thoughts beyond this space today. I'm going to just go through to the last, just for the sake of time here, to the last section. I do want to also mention that during the event in Massachusetts, I was honored to host Larry Spotted Crowman and his family, who are from the Nipmuc people of that area, and Daystar Rosalie Jones, Pembina and Chippewa Cree, who was born here in the Blackfoot Reservation, an elder who is recognized in dance as the, and she says, pioneer in Native American modern dance. I was honored to host them, and they shared in that space. We also had other members and family members from the Slow Turtle family and Massachusetts people. We had Earl Tooley, a Dene environmental activist, who was also there. And then, of course, my mother and my little one with me, and Dene, VP of DEI at Brandeis, Lee Manuel Betsoy. So in practice and in written work, I continue to approach Indigenous dance in many forms from a lens of knowing dance as a process of coming to know, where Indigenous dance as a form of defiance against settler colonialism engages in decolonial praxis and is a means of repatriating life. In this way, dance is generative and holds possibilities for addressing trauma, violence, and pain, while asserting knowledge, desire, and continuance, despite histories and relentless attempts to eradicate us. In further research, I consider Fancy Shawl danced in and beyond Powwow spaces as a dance that resists, refuses, and exceeds fixity and settler colonial imposed binaries, and specifically gender binaries. And finally, despite the ongoing structures of settler colonialism that pose ongoing threats of material, actualized gender and sexual violence against Indigenous bodies, our dances continue and they respond. They reclaim bodies and knowledge, they reimagine, and they keep our worldviews alive. Thank you.